Welcome to Hello Bookseller with me, Stephen E. Andrews, writer, bookseller, collector, and today we have an exclusive. This is the 60th anniversary edition of New Worlds, and this is volume 66, number 224, in a large format magazine form again, for the first time in many years that it's been in this format. I think, apart from the Odyssey late 70s, maybe this is the first time it's been in the large format since the sort of classic run in the late 60s, and this is edited by Michael Moorcock, and of course it's the 60th anniversary of Moorcock taking on editorship of the magazine. And though there have been various trade paperback reboots on and off through the 90s, there were a little series about 5 Golanks, and there's the current run which is from PS. There's a new one of those coming soon. This is a very special one. This is a world exclusive, apparently, according to John Davey, who is Mike's bibliographer and collaborator on numerous things. I'm the first person to receive a copy of this out of the printers, so you're seeing this before anybody else. It's published on the 30th of September 2024. I'm filming this on, what is it today, the 18th? So this video is going to go up today, so you will see it, and it's got this wonderful piece of cover art, more about the artist later on, which depicts my ultimate anti-hero, Jerry Cornelius, who is there dressed as a bus conductor, as you see, and the word Wigan of course refers to the Jerry Cornelius story, which is in here, the brand new Cornelius story, which is entitled Wigan. And the cast of all the usual suspects there, we can see Frank Cornelius, Miss Brunner, or is that Trixie Brunner, her daughter with the red hair, Una Person and Catherine, Mrs. Cornelius, Bishop Beasley, Colonel Piat, they're all in there, and it's the usual malarkey of commedia dell'arte, new wave SF, and general political chaos that we know and love. As to how you order it or pre-order it, I'll cover that in the description below because I'm not certain of the details yet, but I will get that in there, I promise. I'll get the details from Mike and John if necessary. So let's have a look at the content. So we just pop it open there, and it's okay. So, and it's from PM Press, wonderful little independent publisher who've done these great books about collecting paperbacks, including Dangerous Visions and New Worlds, which is a fantastic one, and other things as well. And they've done this book by Terry Beeson, which I must say I want to pick up. And there is the contents page. The wonderful cover art is by Mark Reeve. I can't say I know Mark or his work. And there's illustrations by Julius Stafford Baker, Herbert Sidney Foxwell, which I think are from old children's books, John Coolhart, who we'll know and love, many album covers and lots of work on illustrating Moorcock stories. Alan Couch, you'll see his work, he did the back cover, some materials, and the iconic Maldine, of course, an old sort of favourite of New Worlds fans from the 60s, photographs by Linda Steele, that's Mike's wife, and that's one of J.G. Ballard and Moorcock, John Minhan, Pamela Zoline, and Ruby Rose Com, not sure who they are, but there you go. So, an editorial by Mike, an unfinished beginning of a comic novel by Thomas M. Dish, Peanut and Buster, Pamela Zoline, Bears Discover Singularity, John Clute, a non-fiction piece, a Sladek reprint, a new piece by Ian Sinclair, Alan Couch's art, a prose fiction piece, or prose poetry piece possibly, by John Coolhart, Pamela Zoline, non-fiction, the new Jerry Cornelius story, some poems by Ros Caveney, and another sort of interesting prosy poemy thing by John Davey. And thanks to John for getting this to me. He went to a lot of effort to get this to me, and Mike was very keen that we had it. And the original intention was to pop this in the interview video that's coming up, but that's going to be very long, and I wanted to get this up for you to see it because it's taken me a while to edit that. So an editorial from Mike, and there he is with JG. And this basically covers the brief history of New Worlds since Mike took the magazine on in '64. Of course, it was going long before that. It's the longest running British SF magazine. Began as Nova Terrae before World War II. But of course, from 64 on, it became utterly synonymous with the true new wave. It's not the American new wave, which is more centered on taboo breaking, though there were plenty of taboos broken in this magazine, believe you me, but more on the merging of SF and literary fiction. And this is referred to in here. And Moorcock says how he and Ballard and Barrington Bailey were tired of generic literary fiction as well as SF, and believed they could cross-fertilize the two while experimenting with techniques. So there you go. And we see some contributors there on the right, portraits. Some of them gone now, like Tom Dish and John Sladek. There is a John Sladek feature coming up on the channel before too long, I hope. But the others very, very much with us. And there's an online section at the New Worlds Annex, it said, and I'll put the URL for that in the description to this video. So we look on, it's got nice paper, and it's lovely to see it in the magazine format. And here's the Dish story, Peanut and Buster, A Tale of Forbidden Love. I've only had time to skip through this. I haven't read it all yet. I'm going to sit down and read it cover to cover when I can find a few hours. And I read the sort of first few paragraphs of this, and instantly it was classic Dish. I felt like I was reading 334 all over again, except it's written long after, of course. But yeah, very, very much in the classic sort of wry manner of Dish, with the black humour, the mordancy, and the beautiful, beautiful writing. So there you go. So that'll be a real treat for us Dish nets to get into that. Dish peanuts, I suppose. And several pages of that, these charming illustrations, to say, which I think are from children's books. So there we are. We've got quite a few pages of that. So that's one to roll over the eyeballs. Interestingly, there's an advertisement here for Australia Press for a book called The Book Blinders, Annals of Vandalism at the British Library. And this is by John Clute, who is the finest SF critic in the world. And of course, way, way back in the 60s, he started writing criticism for New Worlds. And his criticism is very well known. And I refer to John as pretty much the expert on SF. I would bow before him on pretty much everything. And this is about how the British Library, you know, they have a copy of every single book published legally by law. They're supposed to always have one, but they basically threw away all the dust jackets. The first ones appeared in 1819, and you know, this is really, really sad. So this is history of that. So I might get that. It'll be really interesting. There's 115 books whose jackets have survived. Obviously, after a certain point, jackets become more common, because when people started collecting modern first around about the 1950s, you know, people started getting hold of the jackets and holding on to them. Then we have a story by Pamela Zoline, who is luckily still with us. Bears Discover Singularity, and you can see some bears there with the old fireworks exploding. And it says, with thanks to Terry Beeson, who wrote the wonderful Bears Discover Fire in 1990. Now, Terry Beeson died, was it early this year or late last year? And if you've never read Bears Discover Fire, which I think won the Nebula Award, it's very, very good, very funny little story. Loved it. And I feel I've not read enough Beeson. I've read a bit, but I'd like to read more. And Zoline, of course, contributed the classic New Wave SF story, The Heat Death of the Universe, to New Worlds, and I think in 1967. And she was living in London. She was American. And there was later on by Women's Press a collection of all her short stories called The Heat Death of the Universe. And that particular story conflated the life and a day of a housewife confronted by the drudgery of housework, and how that related to entropy and the collapse of systems, the second law of thermodynamics. And it's really, really great stuff. But it was also very much in the tradition of SF by women, going back to Judith Merrill and before. So it's great to see her writing that story. I'm looking forward to reading that, because I love Bears Discover Fire. And as you can see at a glance, this fairly experimental layout. It shouldn't feel experimental now, because of course these things were all done a long time ago, but New Worlds was seminal in putting things like concrete poetry, prose poetry, illustrations into text. And as you see, this is quite a substantial story, and that's going to be great fun. And you've got these little chapter headings, very, very New Wave style, and also a graph. So this is classic and typical of the kind of striking imagery New Worlds always really went for, and it was as much an art magazine as a fiction magazine. Then there's a great non-fiction piece, which again I've only flicked through, and I want to really give it my attention. 2 pages by John Clute, Apolda in 1967, dish sladek zoline. Now, if you don't know what a polder is, technically it's something they have in the Netherlands, and I'm off to Amsterdam in 6 weeks. I've never been to the Netherlands before, and you know the way that's one of the Low Countries where, of course, the sea level is actually above the ground much of the time. So, of course, they built dikes. So a polder is an area sort of within dikes, as I understand it, just like a special zone or enclave. But a polder also means a kind of state of mind. So it's like when you go into the through the wardrobe into Narnia, for example, it's that sort of thing. And the term polder is used a lot in the Encyclopedia of Fantasy, which Clute and John Grant edited, and they brought that piece of terminology into discussion of fantasy in a critical sense. And this really looks at when Zoline, John Sladek and Thomas M. Dish were all living in London, and John knew them between 1962 and 1967. And it's a great piece. I've only flicked through it, but I really want to read it, you know, bit by bit, syllable by syllable, and really roll it over the eyeball. So that's going to be great stuff for those of us who are fascinated by the history of the New Wave. Then a classic John Sladek story with illustrations, and it's good to see that back, The Poets of Millgrove, Iowa, and that's a Maldine illustration. Maldine did lots of work for New Worlds, lots of classic Jerry Cornelius pictures, and you know, you can see the lineage going back to things like, you know, Gustave Doré, Crazy Cat, all those things, and it's always very funny and very pointed. And even George Gross I can see in them as well. You know, he really was quite something, Maldine. Fantastic stuff. One of the seminal New Worlds artists. Then a piece by Ian Sinclair. And of course, it's also the 100th anniversary of Surrealism being named. And this conflates Surrealism with New Worlds, with Ian's usual London obsession, J.G. Ballard. You can see Ballard there. There's the Westway flyover. That's a figure, I think, from a Max Ernst painting, I seem to recall. I used to be quite a student of the Surrealists when I was a lad. And as usual, this is going to be a very sort of intense melange of images and ideas and literary allusions, which we love from Ian. And it's great to see him. I think this is his first time in New Worlds, so that's a really important thing. And he's got a new novel out, which I'm told by a friend of mine and by Mike Moorcock is absolutely superb. And this is quite a big piece, which is great to see that. So looking forward to reading that, because Ian's like an archaeologist of knowledge. And then we come into a portfolio in the centre by Alan Korsh, artist who does the back cover as well. And we see some very surreal images. And of course, Surrealism is about the unconscious. New Wave science fiction often delved into the unconscious. It was about soft science, about inner space. So here we go on a journey in full colour into inner space. And I think you'll agree these are very arresting, striking images there, and quite frightening. I mean, something which always comes to my mind with Surrealism is Lewis Carroll and Alice and the falling down the rabbit hole of that very sort of lysergic, dreamlike state, which is very edgy and scary, on the verge of the sublime. And there, this one particularly really gets me. Yes, the multi-headed little girl with a bear goes to bed, and the bear's a little girl bear. She's got a dress on. Perhaps it's a trans bear, who can say? And yeah, so there's an article then about John Coulthard, about Surrealism, which I misdescribed in the introduction. My apologies for that. I'm still getting used to this issue. And that's followed by an article about the famous Institute for Research in Art and Technology exhibition that J.G. Ballard put on of Crash cars before he wrote Crash. And people turned up for the launch, and there's all these sort of damaged cars there, and it became quite, let's say, interesting. And that led eventually to the writing of Crash some years later. New sculpture by J.G. Ballard, Crashed Cars. So it was, in Ballard's words, he said that it was quite interesting what people were doing as they were drinking and growing more aggressive and getting aggressive towards the cars. Fascinating stuff. And this is Pamela Zoline's take on this. And also she writes about a little project she did with Ballard, which is about something called portrait boxes, which is fascinating. I don't tell you too much about that, so I'm going to read it for yourself. So do get a copy of this. And then we're on to Wigan, the new Jerry Cornelius story, which has the entire cast in it. As ever, it's arch, oblique. It puts you in a state of chaos and conceptual breakthrough. You're trying to work out what's going on. There's huge cognitive dissonance. It's very funny if you know the characters. If you don't know the characters, then you need to go back and do your research to start with the final program. But I really enjoyed this, and it's the first Cornelius story for a while. There is one in Reports from the Deep End, which I haven't read now yet. Actually, I must dig that out. So this was a great joy, and I mean, even characters like Karen von Krupp from A Cure for Cancer is in this, and she hasn't appeared much compared to some of the other characters. A wonderful drawing there by Mark Reeve of Una Person and Catherine Cornelius and Jerry there. Really, really nice. I wouldn't mind a full-size print of that. That's beautiful stuff. So yeah, so I have read that and really enjoyed it. I love the Jerry Cornelius stories. I'll be covering them in some depth over the next year or so on the channel. Brilliant stuff. So yeah, nice substantial story, as you can see. And the little advert there for PM, the publishers of this, for their Moorcock backlist, which includes the entire Between the Wars sequence, or the Colonel Piat Quartet as they call it here. Byzantium Endures, The Laughter of Carthage, Jerusalem Commands, The Vengeance of Rome. And these are very handsome trade paperback editions with Mike on the cover in different guises. Also London Peculiar, great non-fiction thing. And also mentioned here, we've also got Modem Times version 2, which is a cracking little chapbook, which I do have. And yeah, look, I can see it now from where I am. And that's one to get as well. Then we have 3 poems by Ros Caveney, who's a critic who I met once a long time ago. It's very, very nice. Critic, book reviewer, anthologist, and 3 poems for Rachel Pollack. And Rachel Pollack wrote Unquenchable Fire, edited a book of tarot stories, wrote Doom Patrol for DC Vertigo for a while, died a while ago, great shame. Apparently extremely nice person, so that's a little tribute there by Ros for Rachel. And then an interesting kind of prose poem of the fantasy type by John Davey, and it's dedicated to the members of Jeff's Airplane, I can see there. And we finish with a little advert here for something coming from Alan Moore and Steve Moore, which some will turn a lot of you on, I know. Isn't that beautiful? The Moon and Serpent Bumper Book of Magic. So that'll be really interesting. Isn't that beautiful artwork? Lovely. So that's coming in, yeah, hardcover by the look of it. And we close with the artwork on the back from Mr. Korsh. Fantastic, with a little raccoon there emerging and chained. Some cards, and doubtless has some magical significance. So that's New Worlds volume 66, number 224. Hope you enjoyed looking at that. As I say, I'll put the details of how you can order below. If they're not there as soon as you look, I will get to that as soon as I find out. But it does have an ISBN number. I'll enter that, and because it's got an ISBN, theoretically you should be able to get it, but I'm sure you can probably buy it direct from pmpress.org. okay, hope you enjoyed buying that. It's a cracking work. It's a beautiful thing, as you can see, for the cover alone, and then the content, magnificent. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Next up, probably a day or two, will be the Moorcock interview. Bye for now.